Hey, beautiful people, 1010XL, it's your boy Deej. Hope y'all having a blessed day today. So I was watching some clips earlier, for Helmets and Heels and, for their current show today. And they talked about, the biggest topic was, how do the Jaguars avoid, a drop off from last season? And, Taylor Dahl and, played a clip of Liam Cohen talking about, we want to be measured on consistency. Consistency is the best measure of success. And it's all about the Jaguars being consistent. And going off what Taylor Dahl said, she brought up, multiple teams, how, teams have kind of set a standard for how they want to be as a franchise. The Pittsburgh Steelers, even though we give them a lot of stuff about they haven't had a lot of success in the playoffs, they've always been a consistent, first-class, well-run organization. And just doubling down on that, the Jaguars have to get to a point where, we're like the Texans. The Texans, and I know C.J. Stroud from example. Trevor, C.J. Stroud, even though, right, there's been a lot of talk about him, he's got to have a prove-it year. And he certainly does. He's got to play better for him to get that next contract. But the one thing you can say, since the Texans brought in Nick Caserio and their new, and D'Amico Ryans, the Texans have built a consistent foundation, which is, an elite defense and, a top-tier offense, particularly in the passing game, where they'll take the next step in the running game. But just going back on topic, the Texans have been consistent. They've been CJ Stroud has won playoff games. Now it's all about getting, to that next step and getting that team where you had an elite defense. But if CJ Stroud doesn't turn the ball over 5 times in a, playoff game, the Texans are probably, or more likely, in my opinion, in the Super Bowl. That's how good the Texans are. The 49ers, you could talk about the same thing. Of course, they've been, injured. They've dealt with some injuries and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is they're always in the mix. We're always talking about the 49ers because when they're healthy, consistently healthy, they're always in the mix. The Rams, since Sean McVay has been there, the Rams have been a really consistent franchise. Les Snead. So it's all about, how can Tony Boselli, Liam Cohen, it starts with, of course, the big three. It starts with James Gladstone, Tony Boselli, and Liam Cohen getting us to a point where we can be a consistent, and like Liam Cohen talked about in his interview, a consistent, respectable franchise. We've even seen, the Detroit Lions kind of been a similar boat, right? Just putting, everything kind of into retrospective here, where the Lions, were in the gutter for years with Matthew Stafford, for years with Barry Sanders. They had great players like Megatron and stuff like that, but they were never able, the franchise, it was always a mediocre franchise. Well, guess what? The Ford family, they brought in Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes from the Rams and, Dan Campbell from the Saints. And what have they been? They've set a standard. They've set, a foundation, Dan Campbell went viral, for his, when he got hired as the head coach and how we're going to kick you in the teeth, or, we're going to get up and you're going to knock us down. We're going to get back up. And look at the Lions now. Even in the Lions, they missed the playoffs last year. Since Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have got there, they have been a consistent, well-run organization. So it really starts with the Jacksonville Jaguars and those three, of course, James Gladstone, Liam Cohen, and, the Jaguars, moving forward. Another point I want to talk about, too, is obviously, particularly if we're talking about this season. So we went 13-4. Liam Cohen has said, we're at a point now where we'll play anybody on any given day and we're going to move on, from last year was last year. We're not going to focus on this year. My biggest thing is that the Jaguars, look, it's going to be a more difficult schedule this year. We're playing a lot of more difficult teams, like the Cowboys are playing the Ravens, we're playing the Eagles, we're playing the Texans, the Bengals, who have given us some trouble. It's going to be tough this year. So I don't expect the Jaguars to go 13-4 like last year. But what I do expect the Jaguars to at least go 11-6 this year. And I also expect the Jaguars now, again, what do we talk about with consistency? All right, guess what we didn't do? We didn't win in the postseason, right? And, Travis Hunter, I think we saw his absence from that last year play a big role in that. Like, we saw Travis Hunter not being on the field. A lot of people talk about we got there without Travis Hunter. Well, guess what? Travis Hunter was missing in the most important game, which was the Buffalo Bills game. So now it's all about our main guys. Caleb Ransall is also another guy. So, getting these guys back, Jordan Lewis, another guy, getting healthy and stuff like that. Like, it's about a little bit of luck. Mike Brown brought up this point about the Knicks, where it takes a little bit of luck. We saw OG Anunoby make one of the craziest things. A lot of that had to do with luck, but also, too, it's just OG Anunoby being OG Anunoby. But getting back on topic, we can still go 11-6 this year, so we maybe regress from a record standpoint, but we're still a good, consistent football team. Trevor Lawrence takes that next step. offensively, year 2 in the Liam Cohen offense. He's in full command, full control. Parker Washington takes that next step. BTJ takes that next step. Bashal Tootin proves that he's the RB1. LaQuint Allen, Chris Rodriguez, and those guys take the next step. Our defense, not only, we took the football away last year, we don't maybe have to take the football as much, but we can still be a top-notch defense. And then winning in the postseason. We got to win in the postseason. That's where it starts. The regular season, of course, counts because it matters with seeding, but you got to win in the postseason. And that's what the Jaguars have to do. The Jaguars have to get to a point where how we were in the 90s with Mark Burnell, Jimmy Smith, and McCardell and those guys. We got to be more consistent, get to that consistent point as well with Fred T and the crew. So that's my take on that. Hopefully y'all have a blessed day today. Stay easy. Peace out.